And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and as always, next to me is my beautiful co-host Laraib, as we are super excited to break down week 3 of the NFL season. All 16 games have wrapped up, and we are here to break them all down for you. Pretty exciting slate of games, some absolute blowouts, some pretty close, fun games. A lot to get into this week. And then, Rob, you want to say anything before we hop into these picks? We don't have to if you don't want
No,
to.
nothing to say, Lewis. Let's just go right into them if we can, Lewis. Here we go. My second dub in a row, Lewis. Another 14-point performance from me. And the New Orleans Green Bay and the Chargers Minnesota game kind of canceled each other out, Lewis, and it came down to my Houston Texans with the upset over there in Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence now 1-4 in his career against the Houston Texans, Lewis. That will be interesting to talk about later on when they face once again, Lewis. But that was the difference this week. Another 14-point banger from me and another loss for you. Put me at 2-1, but still a long NFL season ahead of us, Lewis. So I'm not going to be too happy just yet.
Yeah, I mean, my upset, the Titans just absolutely got their doors blown off by Cleveland. My lock hit. I'm happy about that. Kind of expected it too. But yeah, Houston has been the bane of my existence in these picks the last 2 weeks. I might just trail you next week, honestly, with the Houston games. I think they're playing a good team though, so we'll see how that works. But yeah, not a great. I mean, that's 13 and 12 points on the picks. I can't be mad at my performances, but you're just edging me out in the margin. So I'm going to have to get back to the lab and maybe pull out some craziness next week. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But Laraib, let's go ahead and start breaking down week 3, starting with that New Orleans Green Bay game in which I got a lot of flack. I picked the Packers. And you know what? I seemed like the biggest idiot on planet Earth betting against my own team. And they come out of the gates on fire. 17-0 lead at half. I looked like an idiot. And I just didn't have much belief. And then Derek Carr goes down. Packers really swing the momentum, score 18 unanswered points in the fourth quarter, and deliver the Saints a heartbreaking defeat. Laraib, I'll let you start with this one. From a Saints perspective, how worrying is this loss, or is there some optimism from this?
Well, the little bit of optimism that you can have, Lewis, is that Jameis Winston coming in has some familiarity in this offense. Now, what you want to kind of harp on, as long as I've been watching the Saints, Lewis, what's been dominant from this team has been that offensive line as long as I can remember. And this year, it just has not been up to that same standard. And we saw it from week 1, Lewis, where Derek Carr was getting pressured all game long. And we kind of just attributed that to the Titans defensive line. And then you go into Carolina and he struggles a little bit or the offensive line struggles once again. And then in this one, he just keeps on getting pounded and pounded by that Green Bay defensive line, Lewis. And eventually, he takes one bad hit and his shoulder is a little bit banged up, Lewis. And so that's kind of unfortunate. And we'll see what the Saints team does to kind of, improve on the offensive side of the ball. Maybe bring in someone else instead of Trevor Penning, Lewis, on the offensive line. Maybe add some more blockers, play some more 2 tight end sets to kind of, chip on some of those plays, Lewis. Use a running back more as a pass blocker. But it's going to be interesting to see how the Saints offense kind of shifts over, Lewis, because we talked about how Derek Carr was better than Andy Dalton because he makes those throws, and he's better than Jameis Winston because he doesn't overthrow the balls. And now you have Jameis Winston in there, Lewis, and we'll see how this offense shifts from that.
So I have a different perspective on this, and I actually think the offensive line is going to be better. I think you saw a noticeable improvement. It wasn't Trevor Penning getting worked last week. He didn't have a great game, but he didn't allow any pressures or sacks. So he had a few penalties here and there that cost the team. But overall, not that bad of a performance. It was guys like Ryan Ramczyk and Eric McCoy, arguably your 2 best offensive linemen, getting absolutely worked by Kenny Clark and Rashawn Gary, like you mentioned. But I think this offensive line has actually shown me something in the last week to make me a little bit optimistic. I think with time and communication, I think this offensive line will actually get better. And now, there's not a lot of offensive lines in the NFL that are really playing well so far this season. You saw the Buccaneers last night. You saw the Rams. You see all these teams who have real struggles. The only team that looks like they have a confident offensive line is the Eagles, who we'll talk about in a bit, and just an absolutely. But those guys have a long track record playing with each other. They have built-in chemistry from years and years and years, and you're plugging in new guys like a Trevor Penning, like a James Hurst at left guard, and the communication is just off. So I think that's something. The talent is there. These are all highly drafted, highly capable offensive linemen that I think will get it together. Some of the blocking schematics, though, by Pete Carmichael, like there was a play, and I don't know if it was the play that Derek Carr got hurt, but you had two extra tight ends on the line. You had Foster Moreau, and then instead of a tight end, it was an extra tackle. I don't know. I don't know who the tackle was. But then you bring in that extra tackle. He's definitely not as good as Ryan Ramczyk. And then you single him up on Rashawn Gary. Just a bewildering and no chip, no help whatsoever. And Ryan Ramczyk's helping Cesar Ruiz in the middle. That's where you need your help. That was bewildering. My biggest concern for the Saints team, Laraib, is the defensive line. I personally believe the Saints have the best secondary in the NFL. I just think you have studs all across the board. Alontae Taylor looked like a beast in that game. Marshawn Lattimore held it down. Even Paulson Adebo wasn't playing in this game, and you had Isaac Yiadom come in. He looked very impressive. You just have a ton of studs all over the secondary. But my biggest concern coming into the season is you gutted the defensive line. And I told people, hey, first 2 weeks, you played some pretty bad offensive lines in the Titans and the Panthers, who we've seen get worked by other teams as well. And a lot of the pressure you were generating, it was kind of fool's gold. And now you go up against a Packers team and Jordan Love, who did not look good. Do not get it twisted. He had a fine fourth quarter, but he had all the time in the world to operate because we could not get pressure with our front four late into that game once their offensive line settled in following the losses of David Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins. And missing their two best offensive linemen and still not being able to get pressure is very concerning. And that's my biggest concern with the Saints team because I don't know where that pass rushing juice is going to come from. I was saying the thing that could give me hope if Carl Granderson becomes a guy, if he's like a Trey Hendrickson breakout, that could, potentially revitalize. But I don't really see much from him. I saw the extension. He's had some big plays so far, but Cam Jordan's, getting there in age. The middle of the defensive line really isn't that impressive. Brian Brzee, the rookie defensive tackle out of Clemson, he's been pretty impressive so far, but he's not going to play all the snaps. So that's the biggest question mark I have for this team in terms of, this team where some Saints fans are expecting big playoff run or, let's just see what happens when we get in. You're not getting anywhere if you can't get pressure on this Eagles, on the 49ers, because they will sit back and pick you apart with how dynamic their offenses are. That was my biggest gripe. And then the special teams overhaul was also a big issue. I don't like this new punter. Groupie, I do like Groupie, but he missed you can't miss that, dude. On the road to, get the lead in the game. It was a long kick, but it was, under 50 yards. That is hittable. That's hittable for any kicker in this league. And Will Lutz probably would have made that kick. So a lot of, questionable decisions by the Saints team so far. It's only one loss. And I would argue it's probably the toughest game on our schedule, as wild as that sounds, as bad as that Packers team looked through 3 quarters of that game. So don't panic. I think the Saints are still in a position where they can win the division, make the playoffs. But the things I've brought up lead me to think that this team is not a contender.
Yeah, Lewis, we'll see what they do moving into the season. Maybe, try some more blitz packages, Lewis. But talking about blitz packages, let's talk about my Seattle Seahawks. Now, I won't go as long as a tangent as you, Lewis, but the 12th man came to play on Sunday for the Seahawks team. Over 8 false start penalties for the Carolina Panthers. And maybe that's just a little bit of miscommunication from Andy Dalton in his first start, but the 12th man was going out there and making a difference, Lewis. And I was really proud of this team, and they had all the excuses in the world, Lewis, to kind of this could have been the typical, Seahawks home loss this year, but they had that earlier to the Rams this season. So we can't have 2 of them this year. But, our offensive line got banged up. Damian Lewis went out. We had guys going in and out all day long. Of course, our 2 sophomore tackles were out for this game. Tariq Woolen was out for this game. Kobe Bryant was out for this game. Jamal Adams was out for this game. Trey Brown, who had a pick 6 last week against the Detroit Lions, went down early in this game. And it was really on our young pieces, Devin Witherspoon, Michael Jackson, not the Michael Jackson you're thinking about, the Thriller one. This is a different Michael Jackson, Lewis.
Okay, I didn't know.
And Julian Love. Now, we did give up 300 passing yards to Andy Dalton.
Yep.
Dalton, and and Adam Thielen. But, our defense was bend, don't break, Lewis, and a 10-point victory at home. I think we'll definitely take it. And of course, we're going into a little bit of a longer week, Lewis. We play on Monday night, and after that, we have our bye. So we can go into this game, feeling pretty strong, Lewis. Of course, our rushing attack was on display in this one, Lewis. Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet with angry runs all day long. And, another 37-point performance, Lewis. Now we think about college football, and maybe 37 points isn't that much in that regard. We talk about NFL putting up almost 40 points, Lewis. That's a great feat, especially against a Carolina defense, which we think is a little underrated. And so great performance by my Seahawks this week.
They put up 37. No, that was a great performance. I mean, we had questions on the defensive end. I think they did a good job. My biggest question was how they were going to defend the run. They did break a few on the Panthers side, but I think overall they held up pretty well. But yeah, good win. Get some momentum going into the Monday night game against the Giants, who, talk about time off. They really have some time off to scheme up for your team. So we'll see what happens with the Seahawks. But after the shaky start, Seahawks are starting to look like the team that we expected going into the season, which is good for you. But let's go ahead and talk about last night's action, Laraib. We had the 2 Monday night doubleheader, which thank God is done for the rest of the year. So sick and tired of it. So real quick tangent. So I have YouTube TV, right? And it gives me the option to have a double box. So I can have both the games going on at the same time. So why do the networks think, oh, well, we need to show both games on the same time on the same program? Now I'm watching the game and it's it's on one half of the screen and it's on the full screen over here. And then that game decides to go in a double box to the other game. If you want to do that, you need to make people choose. You're either watching one or the other. And if you want to watch both, get 2 TVs. Everyone has 2 TVs nowadays. That's your option. If you don't have a second TV, use your laptop. Use Stream East. All right, anyway, but let's get into the actual games. Let's go quickly on this first one, Laraib. Eagles pound the Buccaneers. It was an obvious choice. There was no doubt about it. This Buccaneers team is absolutely garbage. Baker Mayfield is a pumpkin. Not much to talk about, right, Laraib?
No, definitely a lot to talk about on the defensive front for my Buccaneers, Lewis.
Oh, right.
There's only so many times that your offense can, turn over on downs or punt the ball away and go 3 and out. And for this defense, for the Buccaneers, they were just on the field 40 minutes of the game, Lewis. And at that point, you kind of just get worn down. Early in that game, they had an early stop on 4th down when the Eagles were in Bucs territory, and they got the ball back for their offense. And what do? They just punted after 3 downs, Lewis. And it was that kind of same repetition that kind of just slowly broke them down all game long. The Eagles kind of just run up the score late. And so this is kind of what we've been expecting from Baker Mayfield, Lewis. But this Eagles team is great, huh? This Eagles team, you talk about their offensive line chemistry, as how well Jalen Hurts plays. I think, they're on another great run this year, Lewis, and of course a rushing attack.
2 hands slurping that thing like a chug jug right now, okay?
Go on.
So I might have to walk back that statement a little bit, Lewis, but I'm not gonna. You face a team like the Eagles, who are a top 2 team in the NFC, Lewis, and of course it's going to be difficult for you on Monday night against a team like that. But when you play in a division like the Saints, Lewis, like you mentioned, who can't get any pressure apparently, or you play against a team with a rookie quarterback in Bryce Young, or you play against Desmond Ridder 2 times a year, I think you have a good shot of still having a solid season.
I just don't understand what this Buccaneers team is trying to be, because that's my problem is they're not good enough to win this division. I don't think so. That offensive line has a ton of questions on it. You're bound for a Mike Evans trade or injury sometime in the near future. The hamstring is just screaming its name right now. And then the defense just was not holding up. I get it. That Eagles offensive line is a unit and a half, but 8 yards a carry last night is ridiculous against any NFL defense. Now, obviously, credit to the Eagles offensive line, but this was one of the, throughout the Tom Brady stint in Tampa, and they still have a lot of those same guys. Their calling card on defense was being able to stop the run. Teams could not run against this Tampa team. They just had so much, size in the middle. Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh. They had, Shaquille Barrett. And then, Levante David and Devin White linebackers. You could not run the ball. Now it just seems like they're Swiss cheese. Anyone can run on them. And I just don't think they're that good.
Alexander Madison 2 weeks ago.
Well, it doesn't seem like he can run really against anybody. But no, so I didn't like what I saw. And just talking about the Eagles quickly here, we're still seeing some, passing game struggles from Jalen Hurts and this Eagles offense so far. I don't think it's anything to really, go crazy about. I think it's early in the season. I'm not going to say they're trying to figure things out, but your new offensive coordinator, Shane Steichen, really set up a lot for Jalen Hurts. It seems like they're trying to save Jalen Hurts' legs. It's not like the situation in Chicago, which we'll talk about, in which they're just ignoring his strength as a player. They're utilizing his strengths as a player, but it seems like in some of these games where it's like, maybe we should get a design run, maybe we could do a quarterback draw. Just no, go for the easy stuff. Let's use DeAndre Swift. Let's use, a lot of our interior guys. And it seems like they're working. So I think they have a level they can get to. They're just saving Jalen Hurts for the long haul. So I do like the decision there by the Eagles, and I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, Lewis, I think they have some growing pains, especially like you mentioned, the new offensive coordinator. But you expect for them, with just the amount of talent that they have on the offensive side of the ball, for them to figure it out. And of course, an easy win for them on Monday night. And as we continue to see this Eagles team roll, Lewis. But I want to flip it on over to the other game, and what was a lot more interesting to watch, in my opinion, or in everybody's opinion, probably. This Bengals team goes out, Lewis, and gets their first win on Monday night. Now, we talked about Joe Burrow's struggles throwing the ball deep. And what do they do in this one, Lewis? They start that intermediate to short game. You really love how they, you think about Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow and that deep connection that they have, those long balls that break for 75-yard touchdowns. But I love what they did in this one, Lewis. You bring Jamar Chase into the slot and you work that short game. Have him work the middle of the field. Have him work on those flats, Lewis. And that's what they did all night long, and that's how they were able to win this game. Now, T. Higgins had some really bad drops in this one, Lewis, and it could have been a higher scoring game for the Bengals. But I think, Joe Burrow goes out there, has a great game despite the little injury on his calf, and that defense, Lewis, was really the big thing that stood out to me. The Rams team picks up 0 third downs in this game, Lewis. 0 the entire game, not to pick up a third down. We saw Lou Anarumo just masterclass blitzing this Rams offensive line, which is kind of shedding that, just showing us that there could potentially be frauds when you face a team like the Seahawks week 1 who don't have any pressure. And then you kind of, figure it out a little bit against the 49ers defense. But in this one, Lou Anarumo designed those blitzes and he got after Matt Stafford all night long.
I got to disagree with you, Laraib. I don't think Joe Burrow played well at all last night, at least to the standards that I feel like we should hold for Joe Burrow. Throwing 44 times on 53 dropbacks and, decent completion percentage, but it just didn't seem like he was there. Like, this was a gettable defense. There were a lot of throws, and it seems like the playbook was constricted based off Joe Burrow's performance. Laura, only one quarterback in the NFL has a lower success rate on third down, lower EPA on pass play dropbacks. You know who that one quarterback is? It's Mr. Zachary Wilson. So Joe Burrow has clearly not been himself this year, including tonight. Last night, he left a ton on the table, and it was just disappointing. I mean, this offense, Jamar Chase gets 13 catches last night, by far the most in his career. And that's just not Jamar's game. Jamar's not an intermediate receiver. He is 6 for 170 and 2 touchdowns. He's not 13 for 130. That's not his game. He's not intermediate, just cuts comebacks. Now, they found a way to win the game. And huge credit to this Bengals defense, which looked elite against this Rams team. 2 picks from Logan Wilson. Trey Hendrickson looked like an absolute monster. They're getting a ton of pressure on Matt Stafford. So huge shout out to the defense and how they held up in this game, really limiting guys like Puka Nacua and their impact. They couldn't get the run game going at all. And that's honestly what kept them in this game, Laraib, was them preventing the Rams from really getting anything going, preventing them from getting touchdowns, making them settle for field goals, sacking them in huge situations. This offense looked like a big problem to me. And going forward, it's hard to say Joe Burrow's going to get any healthier because he's just going to keep playing games. Now he's on a short week going to play. I think they have an easy game, though. I don't know exactly who, but I do worry about this Bengals team going forward just because I did not like what I saw last night, Laraib.
Well, Lewis, sometimes you just have to play within the system, and I think they did what they needed to do. If you can't throw the ball deep, in this first couple games of the season, why try to force the issue? And like you mentioned, if Jamar Chase is that guy who likes to, have those deep plays, but in this one, if you need him to be intermediate and he gets the job done for you, I don't understand the issue with that at all. If that's
I
how he
just
needs to
I
play for the
hold them
season,
I hold them to a standard of the Chiefs, of the Bills. And I get it. Find a way to win and you win. I am not faulting them for last night. I'm thinking long distance, macro view. I have real concerns about Joe Burrow in this passing game. And it's, if that's a problem with the Bengals, that seems like an easy problem to fix. Joe Burrow will get in the rhythm. They'll be fine. But I don't know if his injury is just going to go away. I don't know if it's just going to get healed. I need to see him. I don't know if he needs to miss games or have just a bang up game. Next week, I just looked it up, Laraib. They're playing at Tennessee, and that defensive line is not going to get any easier. So this is a really tough task for Joe Burrow. And big picture view, I still am not a believer in this Bengals team.
well, Lewis, if they're playing against that Titans defensive line again, I'm kind of expecting another game just like this. Why force Joe Burrow to stand tall in that pocket for over 3 seconds and have guys like Jeffrey Simmons come after him all game? Have guys like Aaron Donald come after him all game. If you want to, the ability for him to get healthier, Lewis, is not going to be for him to stand in that pocket for even longer. So I think they continue to work this short game, even if
they need to be able to run the ball. And they're not going to be able to run the ball against this Titans front. And they didn't really have much success last night running the ball either.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one thing, Lewis, but we saw the Browns kind of have a field day against this Titans team. And so we'll see what this Bengals team can do, Lewis. But I still have hope in Joe Burrow. If he kind of, like I was about to say, if he can keep on working the short game and kind of prevent any more hits on him at least the next couple of games, Lewis, by getting the ball out quickly, he potentially might have the opportunity to kind of heal up just a little bit, Lewis, and kind of get back to that Burrow form that we know. But, that's just something we'll have to see moving on later into the season.
All right, yeah. So let's go ahead and move on, Laraib. We saw 2 devastating blowouts this weekend against 2 teams who had a lot of offseason hype, some warranted, some unwarranted. The Bears and the Broncos getting absolutely demolished this weekend. The Broncos letting up almost an NFL record, 70 points on the road at Miami. And the Bears, they just keep getting destroyed, losing 41-10 against the Kansas City Chiefs. Laraib, which team is the bigger train wreck in your opinion?
It has to be the Denver Broncos, Lewis. Now, me personally, I knew coming to the season that this Bears team was going to be god awful. But for this Broncos, I thought, Sean Payton's going to come in here. He's going to kind of fix this offense. That defense has a lot of, good players on that side. And Vance Joseph last year kind of, was carrying that team. And this year, oh my days, oh my actual days. I can't believe what I was witnessing. I can't witness what I was believing this weekend, if I'm going to be honest, Lewis. I mean, Pat Surtain late in the game, giving up 75-yard touchdowns to Chosen, a.k.a. Robbie Anderson. Just this defense just giving up, Lewis. It's just embarrassing, honestly. For the Bears, you kind of expect them, just awful on the defensive side of the ball. You're playing against the Kansas City Chiefs. And this one, the Broncos, you have Sean Payton, you have Russell Wilson. You think, okay, we have a chance against this, high-powered Dolphins team. But no, they just get steamrolled, Lewis. And it's going to be real interesting to see, who gets fired, who has, what sort of drama builds up after this fallout, Lewis.
I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you. Everything you said, I do agree with. However, last year, Vance Joseph was not on the team. It was EJ Evero.
They need him back.
Defensive defensive coordinator for the Panthers, and we saw what they did against your Seahawks. But no, he is a good defense coordinator, and he was responsible for a lot of the success they had. Vance Joseph was their former head coach who got fired because he couldn't fix the defensive side of the ball. And yeah, it's all chaos over there. But my answer is the Bears, Laraib, because you're right. Expectations are a big thing, but the way this team has just been fluttering. I mean, I don't even know where to start. I guess I'll start with Justin Fields because there was legitimate MVP hype. And I'm not joking. There were credible people picking Justin Fields to an MVP. So there was some expectation there. Bounce back year. You trade for DJ Moore. You beef up the offensive line. Let's see what Justin Fields can do. We saw how he has a bunch of dynamic, electric, super awesome plays last year with his feet, and he just needs the receivers. It was the receivers last year. It wasn't him. It has been breaking down. I have watched a bunch of, quarterback breakdowns of Justin Fields through his games this season. He doesn't read the field. He does not see the field as an NFL quarterback. He lacks anticipation. He gets easily flustered in the pocket, and he leads the NFL in completions, in sacks, and in interceptions with 4 or more seconds in the pocket. He's getting good protection, and he's still making bad decisions. And I'm not going to put it all on him because the Bears' offense is also just terrible. Luke Getsy has been putting him in positions to fail. Stop trying to make Justin Fields what he isn't. He isn't a quarterback. He's a running back with an arm, okay? If you want to start winning games looking respectable, that's how you do it. And if you want Caleb Williams, keep making Justin Fields throw because he is not capable of reading the field. And it's embarrassing. The defense has been awful. The defensive coordinator just resigns in the middle of the week in preparation for the Kansas City Chiefs. Of course you're going to get blown off the field. Like, how obvious was that? It was just, I don't even want to get into the rumors on why he resigned because that's wild. Matt Eberflus, he's a defensive head coach. You think, okay, well, he could take over as the defensive head coach. And now, obviously, you're going into Kansas City. Not an easy place to play defense. But, I mean, damn, that was embarrassing. And this Bears team, you make these we have to, put into context when we're talking about the Buccaneers and the Packers because it's like, well, I mean, that game was against the Bears, so how much credit are you going to put into it? Because they are not an NFL team. They are so embarrassingly bad that it is a joke. And I feel so bad for Bears fans who year after year after year can't even see competent quarterback play. You know how much they would kill for, I don't know, a Kirk Cousins to come into that building? They would love a Derek Carr. Just some stability at the quarterback position. But I don't know if it's just an organization thing where they prioritize defense. They don't care about glitz and glamour. We're running the ball, we're defense. Well, you can't run the ball, you can't play defense, and your quarterback still sucks.
Yeah, Lewis, just two really god-awful teams, Lewis. And
awful.
Guess what? They get to play each other this week. And so
let's go.
I think I'm rooting for a tie in this one so they can both be winless because they don't deserve it at all, Lewis.
Yep.
Just two of the most just disappointing teams by far this season, like you mentioned. And it's only going to get worse for them. You talk about the Broncos who still have to play the Chiefs twice this year, still have to play
the Chargers
twice this year. I mean, it's going to get real ugly for these teams, Lewis. And we were talking about this beforehand. This might just be the last time we talk about either of these two teams this season. So Bears Broncos fans, enjoy your last 5 minutes on the First and Goal podcast, Lewis. But let's move on to another team who had a disappointing week, Lewis. The Dallas Cowboys went into Arizona and got stunned by Josh Dobbs, Lewis. And now, of course, the Cowboys, we didn't get to talk about this last week, but Trayvon Diggs is done for the season with the ACL tear, Lewis, which is really unfortunate for them. But they still have some great guys on the defensive side of the ball, Lewis. You're talking about, they trade for Stephon Gilmore. They still have Javon Curse. The linebacker position, they're loaded. The defensive line, they're loaded. And still, they get chopped up by Josh Dobbs and Rondale Moore and James Conner, Lewis. So what are your thoughts on this game?
I think when you're down 4 starting offensive linemen, it's going to be a tough game. You have 2 embarrassing blowouts in your first 2 games. You're feeling on the moon. You have a letdown week. Now, if you're a Super Bowl caliber team, your letdown week is not covering against the Titans, right? Or against the Texans. Like we saw the Colts last year. They went to overtime against the Texans. But you know what? They still won. And my biggest concern, it was my concern going into the season, and it's rearing its ugly head now, is the quarterback head coach combo of Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott in big moments. In this game, the red zone problems are a big issue. Now, obviously, if your offensive line is healthy, if you have Zach Martin, you have Tyron Smith, you'll be fine. I mean, Tyler Smith as well didn't play in the game. these are key guys who are, those red zone situations. You'll be able to punch the ball in against the Arizona Cardinals. My bigger problem is it seems like Dak has been so concerned with his interception thing. He led the league last year despite missing 3 games in interceptions. It seemed like that was his focus. I'm not throwing interceptions. I'm not going to put the ball in dangerous positions. I'm going to play smart. I'm going to play safe. And it seems like it's really restricted him in some of these passing situations in tight windows in the red zone. And you lose a guy like Dalton Schultz, who is his safety blanket in these confined areas. And then you lose Ezekiel Elliott, who is your power back guy to get tough yards, to break tackles, and get into the end zone. So there are some concerns for the Cowboys. They'll make the playoffs. They'll go far into the playoffs. This defense is not that bad. I think the defense, honestly, was just more of it was a game they looked past. I think this defense will be fine. I don't think all of a sudden they don't have a pass rush. We didn't see the loss of Trayvon Diggs really hurt them in this game. There were a few plays where they got outside the pocket, but Trayvon Diggs really isn't that big of, a tackler. But it'll prove, that injury will bear fruit later in the season when, a pivotal play happens. But I think the Cowboys will be fine. But now it makes me question whether or not my Super Bowl pick is right.
Yeah, Lewis, like you said, a Super Bowl contender just does not lose games like this. They don't look too far ahead later down the schedule, right? Even a team like the 49ers, they're disciplined week by week. A team like the Eagles, they maintain that discipline. And
now
this
we
Cowboys
did see the Chiefs lose to the Colts last year in like week 3. So that's one example. I don't want to discredit your point, Laraib, because you're right, but it can happen, but not in this fashion.
Yeah, especially not in this fashion. You talk about that Chiefs game, Colts game. I remember specifically last year that Patrick Mahomes had so many opportunities to win that game, but they just really couldn't get anything going on offense. You saw him and Eric Bieniemy kind of having some words in that game. But in this one, I think this is just classic, Cowboys fashion, where what's going to happen is, they're just going to hype themselves up a little bit, Lewis. They're going to start feeling themselves a little bit, Lewis, and they're just going to start to fall apart. A well-coached team like Nick Sirianni or Kyle Shanahan will always have their guys ready, Lewis. And in this one, they just kind of look past. And it's, like you mentioned, Dak Prescott has been trying to play safe. He always loves to be that front runner, Lewis, kind of showboating, talking about how good the Cowboys are. And then, he throws an interception, of course, a red zone inefficiencies. I think this Cowboys team has a lot to worry about, Lewis, and especially when you talk about when you have a team like the Eagles in your division and the 49ers in your conference. I think there's going to be real tough sledding for this Cowboys. Like you mentioned, they'll go into the playoffs, still win a home game against some inferior opponent. But when it comes to taking on those big boys over there in the NFC South, Lewis, I don't think they can stack up with the best of them, especially like you said, with that quarterback over there and the head coach over there. They have some boneheaded decisions. Even when you bring in guys like Brandon Cooks to be your wide receiver too, you still can't get anything going in the passing game against the Cardinals, Lewis. Just a really embarrassing loss for the Cowboys. And they'll come out next week all fired up against whoever they're playing and drop a huge game on them. But whenever it really matters, Lewis, Dak Prescott always comes up short.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a bunch of good points there. We have to see it to believe it, Dak and Mike McCarthy. You have to prove it to us. And so far, we're not seeing the evidence. But let's move on to one of your guys, Laraib. Jay Herbo gets his first win of the season on the road at Minnesota, puts up 400 yards, 3 touchdowns. He looked terrific. He's been balling out all season. They lose Mike Williams to a season-ending injury, which just kills the Chargers and me. But the Chargers, especially because he was just such a big part of that passing game. But, they still had success down the way, even after him going out. But it's one of those bittersweet games, Laraib, where even in the win,
ooh, man,
they still found a way to make it as heart-wrenching and as sweaty as possible. So how are you feeling about your Chargers and Justin Herbert after this win?
Well, Lewis, a part of me, I would say almost 50% of my body wanted the Chargers to lose that game just because I know If they went 0-3, Brandon Staley would have been fired. He would no longer have been head coach of this Chargers team, Lewis, and that would have been the best present for me last weekend. But unfortunately, no, even when you go for it and try to give the game away, Lewis, whenever you try to lose on purpose to this Vikings team by going for it inside your own 30-yard line and not getting it. And see, Lewis, we see this all the time with teams when they really need it on 4th down and 4th and 1. They always try to get so cute. I'm going to have a little jet sweep action here and there. I'm going to have some motion here and there. And they don't ever just do the quarterback sneak, Lewis. The easiest play in the NFL, honestly. You see the Eagles do it 3 or 4 times a week and score touchdowns, get first downs, just dominate the game that way. But no, we don't want to do the easy way, Lewis. We want to do it the hard way. We want to do it the hard way. And man, it's just so disheartening to see just my boy Jay Turbo, just turning up this season for the Chargers team. Even when he's trying to throw interceptions, Lewis, it just bounces off the defensive guy's hands and into Josh Palmer's hands for a touchdown. He just can't lose, Lewis, except for the 2 losses he had earlier this season. But no, I mean, this is just so frustrating to have, that guy as Brandon Staley as your head coach. But I still feel strongly about this team. They have a good roster, Lewis. Even with the Mike Williams injury, Lewis, he's a guy who likes to stretch the field for this team. But that's why you drafted a guy like Quentin Johnson to kind of be there for when one of those 2 guys gets hurt. And so I really like the dynamic of this offense still. I still think, it's going to be one of the more fun teams to watch this year, especially with how many points they give up on defense. But man, imagine Sean Payton on this team instead of the Chargers, Lewis. I mean, the Broncos.
Maybe they give up 70 points. I don't know. But let's go ahead, Laraib, and move on to our final topic. We have our Thursday night football preview. Very exciting matchup here, Laraib. We have the Green Bay Packers hosting the Detroit Lions. Detroit favored by 1.5 points on the road. There's a lot to get into for this game. Big divisional matchup. We saw these 2 teams face off last year to make the playoffs. Detroit won, sending Green Bay home, even though Detroit had nothing to win. This is a very exciting game. Jordan Love, first really big, high-stakes primetime game. How do you think he's going to perform?
Well, Lewis, like you mentioned in this one against the Saints, where he had to face, a solid defense, he looked pedestrian in the first 3.5 quarters of that game. And I think when you're facing this Lions team, Lewis, who played really, really well this past week, and I was really impressed. We both thought that was going to be a higher scoring game, just these 2 teams, just touchdown after touchdown. But really, it was that Lions defense who came up big, Lewis. And I will say, Jordan Love is a step up when you're playing from Desmond Ridder. And Christian Watson, I think, is going to be good to go for this one. And we'll see Aaron Jones' status. And so this is going to be a fun game to watch, first of all, Lewis. But I think I'm going to lean Lions in this one. I think Jared Goff, just like we picked him over Desmond Ridder last week, I think Jared Goff is giving the edge in this one over Jordan Love. I think they have more weapons in this one. Maybe Jordan Love's connection with Christian Watson might take a little time to build some chemistry in their first game coming in week 4 together, Lewis. So I'm going to lean Lions. I know Jahmyr Gibbs, maybe not the most outstanding performance from him, but he got the job done, over 80 rushing yards against that Falcons front 7. I think if they can try to work him into the pass game a little bit more than they did, because they needed him as that first and second down running back in this one to kind of run between the tackles and get those big hits and take them. But in this one, if they can try to work him a little bit more in space against the Packers, I really like this Lions team, Lewis.
I agree. I think the key to this game is Jahmyr Gibbs and working him in this run game. We saw the Saints have a lot of success with their depleted backfield against the Packers last week. Now you're getting Jair Alexander back. You're getting Aaron Jones back. You're getting Christian Watson back. I still don't know if David Bakhtiari will play. That will be a game time decision, I'm sure. But I want to see what a fully healthy Packers offense looks like, because what we saw from Christian Watson last year, he is special. I think he's going to provide a whole nother element to this offense and really elevate their ceiling from what we've seen so far. So I don't want to judge Jordan Love too harshly yet, because he has looked pretty mid, but I want to see more from him. And I think, with Christian Watson, it's like bringing in that number 1 guy to elevate the mid quarterback. So I'm very excited to see what he can add to this offense. So I agree with you. I think the Lions win. They need to be able to run the ball. And I think the pressure they can get, Aiden Hutchinson, shout out Brian Branch has had a very successful start to his rookie year. We obviously saw the pick six in that first game against the Kansas City Chiefs. He had a massive game against the Falcons last week, a forced fumble, a bunch of PUs, and a tackle for loss. I mean, he was all over the field. So I like the Lions in this one, Laraib. I think they get it done on the road. Give me Lions 26-23.
Yeah, Lewis, and I will also be going with the Lions. We saw them last week, Lewis, only give up 44 rushing yards against the Falcons, who his team is known to ground and pound the ball. So that's a great, showing out of them. And of course, 7 sacks on Desmond Ridder. If they can have some of that same performance against Jordan Love, really shake him off, Lewis, a little bit in his first year as a starting quarterback, I think the Lions look good in this one. Of course, Dan Campbell is going to have his guys fired up in their first divisional matchup of the year, Lewis. So I'm going to go with the Lions 21-20 as they win and a late touchdown against the Packers.
Dang, so you have Green Bay covering in this one. Okay. So, Laraib, that is going to do it for our episode today. We covered a ton of stuff. We've just been so excited to talk about this NFL season, and we will be back on Thursday to break down another full 16-game slate of our Week 4 action. Laraib, anything you want to say before we head out of here?
No, I think this is the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.